Thank you to BetterHelp and Design Lab for sponsoring today's video. In just 2 years, I went from knowing nothing about UX design to eventually working at Amazon's UX design team, and also got to interview at other companies such as IBM and Meta. If you've seen my past videos, you would notice I also took a UX bootcamp to do just that. And now today, as a full-time UX designer, I want to share with you my 5 secrets of how I approached my bootcamp differently that I believe really gave me an advantage to have as successful of a transition as I did. I'm not saying this will work for everybody, but from experience, this has definitely worked for me. So for more UX design and career content, don't forget to like and subscribe, and let's jump into the video. So for a bit of context, before I got into tech, I was originally in the fashion industry, and I decided to switch because I wanted better work-life balance and better pay for the hours that I was putting in. I thought to myself, if I were to switch industries altogether, I might as well try for the highest level that I could. So to lead into tip 1, I aimed for FAANG to be my standard. I believe this did 2 things for me. The first is it naturally set a higher standard for me to achieve. And the second thing it did is give me a lot more motivation. And in my mind, I thought even if I did fail and wasn't able to get into FAANG, I thought at least setting my standards higher with those types of companies would objectively help my portfolio and at least give me a better chance of being accepted to another company. From this, a major point of advice that I did want to share from learning about FAANG type of portfolios is that there are 2 types of case studies that I've noticed. The first being more standard practical case studies, such as trying to improve the subscription rate of an app or service. And the second is more conceptual types of case studies, like trying to do something with AR or VR or solving for a more ambiguous problem. So I noticed for FAANG, between the 2 of practical and conceptual is the more preferred case study, but in my opinion, you need to show both in your portfolio. That said, I would say definitely do a minimum of 2 case studies. I think 3 to 4 case studies would be the best, but more than quantity, definitely less is more, best is more. Even for my portfolio, I only showed 1 or 2 projects when I was interviewing because I learned from my own mentor who worked at Google that it's a lot better to show 2 really well done case studies than 4 design sprints or projects that you didn't objectively have enough time to think thoroughly on. That's why in some boot camps they would offer a design sprint, which I've still done, but I did not include those in my official portfolio or walkthrough presentation, and instead treated it more like a quick design exercise. And if all of this sounds stressful so far, it definitely was for me. I did ask for it because I was super serious about making the most out of this transition. During this time, I did seek out a professional just to have a safe space to talk about this chapter in my life and to receive any tools I needed to approach this chapter in my life in a better way. And that's why I'm excited to tell you about today's sponsor, BetterHelp. So BetterHelp's mission is to make therapy more affordable and accessible. And this is an important mission because finding a therapist can definitely be pretty difficult, especially when you're limited to the options within your area. Because it's online, it's remote, and by filling out a few questions, BetterHelp can help you match with a therapist in as little as a few days. And it's easy to sign up and get matched with a therapist. There's a link in my description where you can get 10% off at betterhelp.com/SharonYeonKim. So clicking that link not only helps support this channel, but it also gets you 10% off your first month so that you can connect with a therapist to see if they can help you. And because finding a therapist is a little like dating, if you don't really fit with that therapist, which can be a common thing, I've definitely switched therapists in my experience, you can easily switch to a new therapist at no additional cost without stressing about insurance, who's in your network, or anything like that. When I used BetterHelp during this career transition in my life, it really did help me navigate this chapter because I was under a lot of stress, a lot of phases where I was very close to burnout, and therapy definitely did help find the tools to approach this work-life balance and navigating that career transition in my life in a more healthy way. So if you're struggling, consider online therapy with BetterHelp. Click the link in my description or visit betterhelp.com/SharonYeonKim. Thank you again to BetterHelp for supporting this channel. For secret 2, it's to do as much pre-work as possible before your first capstone project by reading as many successful case studies as possible. So to go more into that, before even starting my first project at my bootcamp, I did a lot of pre-research, going through as many FAANG level design portfolios and case studies as possible, just so I can gauge what that standard was for these types of companies and what those types of portfolios looked like. Some other resources to find these really good portfolios are cofolios.com as well as adplist.org. A quick tip, there was this very helpful article called The Case Study Factory, which has been super helpful for me to know how to structure the case study and approach it, which I definitely recommend before doing your first project, and I'll also link that in the description below. Also reference my video here of a more in-depth look of how I structured my case study, but long story short, I've noticed that these case studies have very beautiful UI, not wordy. It is one, key track scroll through the entire case study, and that's where you get to the end. And they usually show their projects, their portfolio in a simple grid structure. I was told by my mentor to keep it within a simple grid structure and try not to do anything fancy until you've gained at least a year or two of experience. Plus, I really want to mention this in terms of, the project ideas. Do not do shopping app, and do not do a food delivery app. So redone over and over again. There's only so many different options you can have with this. I've reviewed portfolios before. 95% of them usually don't make the cut. And that ties back into my first point of either having the practical case studies or conceptual. Those two things lean more towards the practical when you should focus more on conceptual portfolio prompts. Now, secret number 3 is that the mentor is your lifeblood, so definitely request specifics. Looking back, I definitely see how that was one of the most, if not the most important factor into having a successful portfolio, because of course, if they work at the place that you eventually want to work for, they would have the knowledge and experience to give you the portfolio that you need. This bootcamp and Springboard had a specific mentor who worked at Google, and I knew that because I wanted to work at FAANG, I specifically requested that person. Whatever bootcamp you're doing, if you really want to be matched with that person, 2 tips. The first is that you have to specifically request them or whatever options by name. And the second is you have to clear your schedule as much as possible so your availability with that person can match up. Of course, there is as much effort to match you with your best fit, but if the availability doesn't match, then there is absolutely nothing you can do just because of logistic reasons. So when I was doing it, I was so serious about this transition that I remember, I think I was on like a call with one of their advisors. Remember, I literally told them, I don't care if it's 3 in the morning, if that is the only time available for me to be matched with this person at this company, then I will do it. Luckily, I did not have to stay up till 3 for that to happen, but I did get the mentor that I wanted. It was a great relationship. He helped me get into my first company, then eventually Amazon, and we still keep in touch till this day. And speaking of having a great mentor, this is why I'm so excited to mention today's sponsor and UX Bootcamp, Design Lab. I'm literally so excited to partner with them because since I mentioned in the previous tip, having, that quality of instructors is so important. I've noticed with Design Lab, they do offer a lot of options for really great mentors that you can choose from. Plus, after graduation, Design Lab can connect you with a career coach to help you prepare materials, do interview prep, and make your application stand out in an average of 6 to 9 months. But if you're not sure about the full 6 to 9 month bootcamp, they do have a UX Academy Foundations course, which allows students to decide whether UX design and Design Lab structure is for them. So this foundations program is an initial $500 investment, but if students like the foundations course and decide to transition into the full 6 to 9 month bootcamp, they get a $500 tuition credit. And on top of that, using my unique link, you'll get another $100 off your initial foundations tuition. I know that was kind of a lot, but if you follow my links in the description at checkout, you will see the discount applied at the end. So all the details will be in my description box down below, and thank you again for Design Lab for sponsoring today's video. So with that said, let's move on to the 4th secret. And the 4th secret that I have is to get extra mentorship, not from your peers, especially at the beginning of your capstone project. I remember during my bootcamp, there are modules or check-ins at each point of whatever project that you're doing that asks you to get feedback from your peers within the Slack channel or whatever community of cohort that you're currently in. But instead, I never once asked feedback from my peers, but instead I asked full-time UX designers for their opinions and feedback on my concept ideas, research process design, and UI designs throughout my project. So this thing about asking and getting feedback from your peers, I think it could be useful for practicing design thinking and explaining your decisions to other people. But in my opinion, in terms of getting feedback, I think to myself, since I don't know anything, and assuming that my peers don't know anything, there's probably not going to be as rich of advice that I can really take away from versus if I went to a already full-time UX designer to get feedback for my project. But I also know with the mentor that you are paired with, that might not be as feasible. So what I did instead is with the 2 websites that I mentioned earlier, Cofolio's and adplist.org, I used both of those websites to have a lot of extra check-ins and calls with other full-time UX designers to give me feedback on my project. Especially I recommend this before you start designing anything or research anything. It's especially for that concept idea phase of your project within that initial capstone or that first project that you're doing. The reason why I say this is because at that point, your project is the most malleable. Too often I've reviewed case studies where sure, it's 90% done, it looks visually beautiful and all the UI is great, but it turns out it was another shopping app which could have easily been avoided if you just took more time to talk about that initial concept with your mentor or other UX designers. Plus, having that more ambiguous, unique problem to solve is going to be a lot easier to catch the eye of recruiters. So now the fifth and last secret that I have is to study graphic design instead of specific UI tutorials. This is what my mentor told me. In a recruiter's mind, if they're going through your portfolio, they're probably thinking, if this person has good UI, they probably also have good UX. Since, you're applying for jobs, this is going to be the first impression a recruiter has of your portfolio. The visuals absolutely matter and they have to be as beautiful as you can. So to help with that, to help with UI and kind of layout stuff, I was just thinking to myself, well, where does the essence of UI come from? And I thought to myself, I think the essence of UI design is probably graphic design. And on that note, I thought if I study graphic design, it'll naturally give me a wider framework of how visuals of type and colors would look on paper. And then I can take that deeper, richer knowledge of graphic design and condense it into specific UI details. To help with this, I did go on Dribbble really often, just typing in, app visuals. I'm not really concerned about UX at this point. It's more just to consistently see how other people have done UI. Maybe it'll also give you inspiration of how to do UI as well, and just really taking note of how other people did colors and whatnot, how they laid out their typography, maybe different ways of doing menu layouts. But to learn graphic design, I just really watched a lot of tutorials on YouTube. For example, Graphic Design 101 or Graphic Design in 10 minutes. There's specifically this one video I recommend for everybody to watch, and it's from the future, and it's called The 10 Rules of Type. It's something like that. I'll list it here. I'll also put it in my description box. But that is the one video I recommend for everybody to watch. It essentially just gives a really good understanding of how typography works and really kind of easy hacks to make your UI design better with typography. Beyond typography, definitely any mini tutorials on general graphic design that has to do with fonts, font weights, contrast, and specifically layouts and grid structure. Learning how grids work and how different types lay within specific grids, it's easily going to translate into your UI structure as well, of how you're going to lay out different things within your app. Anyways, I will list that video in the description box, but overall, those were my 5 secrets that I used during my bootcamp: aiming for FAANG, studying as much case studies as possible before your project, requesting specific mentors, getting extra mentorship from full-time UX designers, and studying graphic design instead of UI. I think, if anybody else were to take these 5 tips and apply just 1 or 2 to their own bootcamp experience, it's really going to make a difference. Plus, if you need a safe space to talk about this new chapter in your life, you can get 10% off with BetterHelp, as well as consider Design Lab's Foundations course or full UX bootcamp, where you can get $100 to $500 off your tuition. So all the details and links will all be in my description box down below. If you've enjoyed this video, do not forget to like and subscribe. Let me know which tips stood out to you best, or if you have any questions in the comments. So let me know what you think. Thank you for watching, and until next time.